Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Today, we're going to speak about listening from the point of view of leadership, if you're in a leadership position. And it's not going to be talking about listening in terms of how to deal so much with someone who doesn't listen to you, but if you're in a position of leadership, more in a practical sense, we're going to talk about what you should do. And if you're dealing with a leader who's not listening, this class is not really meant to deal with that situation, other than tell you that if you're dealing with a leader who doesn't listen, just listen to them, because when you listen to people, they're more inclined to listen to you. So that's what the class is going to be about. It's going to be about more practical, not how-to-dos, but the effects of doing and the harmful effects of not doing. And if you want to learn about the how-to-dos, Bir Krishna Maharaj, you can Google him, Bir Krishna Maharaj, in communication. He does workshops on communication, and he gives the practical skills of listening, how to listen. But we're not going to talk so much about the practical skills, but we're going to talk about the effects, the ill effects of not listening, the positive effects of listening, with the hope that whenever you're in a position of leadership, you'll understand and apply these principles. And before we do that, we offer our respects to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Shramaniti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sandivadi Paschati Dastani Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. One of the things that I've come to learn is that not listening is very expensive. In the business world, it's extremely expensive because they play by money, so you can calculate expense. When you don't play by money, you're in a non-profit and you're not looking at your success in terms of dollars. Sometimes you don't realize how expensive it can be not to listen. But I have a story. It's a funny story. And before we begin, somehow it's allergy season again. So I'm going to be in an allergic mood, or an allergic effect. I'm the effect of allergens in the air. So there was a non-profit, non-governmental organization that would go to Africa and help the local people. So they went to Zambia, and they taught the Zambian people how to grow what? Well, they're Italians. What do they grow? Tomatoes. How to grow big tomatoes. They were actually growing tomatoes this big. They taught them how to grow zucchini, because Italians like zucchini. And they taught them how to grow something else. And they found that the people weren't interested at all in learning how to grow tomatoes, or they say tomatoes in British accent, and they weren't interested in growing zucchini. Anything that the Italians were teaching them how to grow, they weren't interested in. So they had to pay people to be interested, to come and learn. They had to pay people to come and learn how to grow. And even though they were paying people, hardly anyone came. And they couldn't understand why. And they had this amazing crop of these biggest tomatoes they've ever seen, because the soil was so fertile in Zambia. And huge, juicy, succulent zucchini. You have another name for zucchini. It's green. You have a French name for it. It's a squash. It's green and long. It's like the big brother to a cucumber. I forget what you call it in Europe. We call it zucchini in America. Anyway, it's something Italians like. So they had this huge crop. And then one day, all these hippopotamuses came, and they ate everything that this Italian company grew. In other words, they were showing the local people how to farm. and they showed them how to grow zucchini and tomatoes and something else. And as I said, the local people weren't interested in learning. And so after the hippos ate everything, the people in the Italian company said, why didn't you tell us that if we grow everything, the hippos will come and eat it? And they said, because you didn't ask us. In other words, they were coming in to do something which was inappropriate within the context of Africa, because the Africans were not doing agriculture in that region, because all the animals would come and eat everything that they grew. And the Italians couldn't understand why these local people were not doing agriculture. And so they came in to show them agriculture. And obviously, the local people were not interested, because the local people knew you can't do agriculture here because there's too many wild animals. And whatever you grow, they'll eat. So the man who explained the story actually worked for that company. He was actually the one doing the growing and the teaching. And he said that for years, everything his company did in Africa failed. And what he learned from that was that his company came in to show the African people what to do and how to do it. But they never came in and asked the African people what they needed and what they wanted. Yeah. They never came and asked the African people, what's the situation here? They just came in with an agenda. And we're going to do this. And he said everything they did failed. And the obvious reason is because it didn't take into consideration the needs of the people, the desires of the people, and whatever information the people could have given them. So his realization was that if you want to be successful in anything, and it's particularly in what he was doing, and he was talking about business as well, if you want to be successful, then you have to listen. Then he made another point, which I think is so important, and I've spoken about this as well. He said, we came in with this imperialistic paradigm of this is what's right and this is how to do it. And obviously, when the British did that in India, the Indians eventually revolted. It was because nobody likes to be told what to like and what not to like and what to do and not do. And the British were doing that. They were telling the Indians, no, you shouldn't do this. This isn't good. You shouldn't eat this way. You shouldn't dress this way. You shouldn't think this way. You should think the way we're telling you. So his point was that nobody wants to be told it should be this way. People want to be heard about what the way they want to do it. So he said, if you look at governments and you look at entrepreneurs, you see there's a big difference, because governments are legislating rules and they're not giving heed to individuals' needs, natures, and inspiration, whereas entrepreneurs are acting on their inspiration. So entrepreneurs do things that governments can never do, and often we look to governments to do things, but within the government there may be no vested interest or inspiration, as there would be with an entrepreneur. So it said some of the greatest things and the greatest needs of the world happen not because of governments, but because of entrepreneurs. And when entrepreneurs are facilitated by people who understand what they want, then things happen. If people don't take time to understand the needs, and particularly in this scenario, what somebody wants to do, where their inspiration is, and instead says this is what you should do, then things tend to fail, as the example of Zambia was. That they failed because they didn't take into consideration what were the actual needs of the people, and it wasn't agriculture, or maybe it was a way to restrain animals, or they move out of that region, or the animals move out of the region. But it certainly wasn't, the need wasn't to grow food, as the Italians thought. Well, it needs to grow food, but it couldn't be grown in that area. So the Italians didn't listen. So there was another man, and his job is to mediate between political parties and specifically between countries that traditionally don't get along. And he said he's had phenomenal success in helping countries get along by listening to their needs, listening to what they need. Say, they're saying, I won't do this, I won't do that. And he would try to find out, what do you actually need? What do you want to accomplish? Or they're putting forward their agenda. This is what we want. But he would find out, well, why do you want that? What's going on behind that? What are the needs? And he found that if he could satisfy the needs of these political parties, even though they'd been political rivals, or countries had been rivals for years, if he could understand their needs and satisfy them, everybody was happy. And so he said he mediated a feud that had been going on for years between partners in a huge, huge company. And what he did by listening is he found out the needs of both partners. And he came up with a solution that took into consideration their needs. And they were both completely satisfied. And so the solution took 4 days, but they had been for 2 years unable to negotiate a solution, which his team negotiated in 4 days by finding out the needs of both sides. Because his point was, someone may say, I want it this way, and the other person may say, I want it this way. But you don't know why they want it that way. You don't know what they're trying to accomplish by that. And so maybe what they're trying to accomplish, it's not necessary to do it this way, because by doing it this way, the other party is fighting. But would you be willing to do it this way if doing it this way would fulfill your needs? Of course they would say yes. If their needs are being met, then they're okay. So he found ways to negotiate that met the needs of each party, and so each party was satisfied, even though maybe the procedures and the agreement wouldn't have been accepted previously, but doing it in a way that fulfilled their needs solved the problem. So I thought that was very significant for us in management of our organization, that when devotees disagree on something and you want to help, or you're in a position of leadership, find out what it is they need. And once you can satisfy their need, then you can get two parties to negotiate. Now, the other side, which is really interesting, the other side is that we're saying here, by listening, especially to their needs, you could resolve conflict. By not listening, you can create conflict. So we go in, and I've seen this, and I've done this myself. We go in, we're asked to take charge of something, or we're given some facility to take charge of something. And so we start thinking how it should be done, and then we come in to tell everyone, this is what we're going to do. And sometimes it's interesting, because what we're telling is going to be done is working somewhere. But it doesn't mean it's going to work where we are, because the climate is different, the culture is different, the people are different. And so a lot of times I've seen this idea of transporting something. Well, it works here, it works in Italy, so let's do it in America. And it doesn't exactly work the same way. People are different, culture is different. So often I've seen, and I've done it myself, someone from one culture comes into another culture, he's in charge of a project or a temple president, and he says, this is how we're going to do it because it works this way in America, so it's going to work this way here, which may or may not be true. It may work and it may not. But rather than asking for feedback to see, what do you think, would this work, or what ideas have you been thinking about, he just says, this is the way we're going to do it. And so if, in fact, it's not going to work, and everybody knows it's not going to work, you're not going to get buy-in from those people because nobody's enthused, because everyone looks at the situation and thinks, that's so American, it won't work here. We don't want your American ways. What they really want is the American to come in and listen to them. And specifically, if you go somewhere and you find devotees are not happy, it's probably because, I can't say in every situation, but it's likely because leadership is not listening to them, that they have ideas, they have inspiration, and it's not being facilitated. And so they're unhappy about it. And they're seeing things are not going well, and they have ideas that could correct them, or they're convinced they could be corrected, or they're convinced they know why they're not going well and what needs to be done, and there's no one to listen to them. So they're despondent, they're unhappy. And so if a new leader comes and says, okay, here's the new way, we're going to do it, it would only work if he's so intuitive that he's doing what everyone wanted done anyway, which it can happen, but it's better that he listens to them because he wouldn't understand everything. So by not listening, you can create conflict, you can make a project worse, and by listening, you can resolve conflicts that have been going on for many, many years. Now, we spoke about this in the last two classes, that sometimes it's not even about making practical solutions, but it's just about the fact that you've listened, and the people who are working with you are so happy that you're listening to them that sometimes they don't even care if there's nothing you can do about it. Because sometimes you'll listen and you actually can't do anything. And even though you don't do anything, the fact that you heard and they know in your heart you would like to do something, but your hands are tied, or you're just not capable, oftentimes they'll be happy. Because if the previous leader wasn't listening, just to have a leader that will listen, just to have a leader that knows what's on their mind and that can take that into consideration now and in the future when they're making decisions, it's very inspiring, it's very satisfying. So, another thing that listening does in a group environment is it creates unity. It creates a more peaceful environment, because when everybody's heard, everybody tends to be more satisfied. Sometimes, for example, when we'll do a meeting, one strategy is before the meeting, you go around and you ask everyone, just say whatever you want to say. And you know, sometimes in meetings you don't get to say what you want to say. So you give everyone like a minute and say, what do you want to say? So let's say it's a meeting of a temple council, or a project meeting within a temple, or wherever you're working. And you're seeing things that are going well, or you're seeing things that aren't going well, and it's really exciting you, or it's inspiring you, or it's really disturbing you and bothering you. And sometimes just to be able to go around and say, I just wanted to share with everyone how excited I am by what so-and-so is doing. I'm seeing amazing results. I'm seeing other devotees are satisfied. Or you might want to say, I just want to share that I'm very upset or disturbed or concerned about so-and-so, because it's created this problem, and this problem isn't being addressed, and it's just getting worse. Just be able to say it, and then each person go around and say it, and if everyone listens to what you're saying, just to be able to say it and be listened to, it brings teams together. It's very, 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 very important. And often what we're dealing with is the fact that if we're not listened to, it's hard for us to listen. So if I'm not listened to, I just want to talk. I want to express what's on my mind, what's in my heart, what are my needs, what are my feelings, because I'm not being listened to. Whereas if I'm being listened to, then obviously the need to speak is less because I'm being listened to, and it empowers my ability to listen. When you're listened to, it's easier for you to listen. So just the other day, a devotee asked me, what do I do I'm expressing my feelings to leaders and they don't listen. One strategy is listen to them and ask them what's on your mind, what's in your heart, what are your feelings, what are your needs, and see if listening to them doesn't help. Now, sometimes we think, well, they're leaders, they don't need to be listened to. Their service is to listen to us. And that's true, their service is to listen to you, but it doesn't mean that they don't need to be listened to. There was a story Bir Krishna Maharaj was explaining, I can't remember the details, but he was saying that when he gives a class, it's encouraging for him to hear that people appreciate it. He said, I need that. That's a need I have. I want to help you, and I need to be encouraged. And he said he was explaining that to Ramapad Swami. And Ramapad Swami said back to him, he said, I also need to be encouraged. So we shouldn't think that people in high positions don't need to be encouraged, don't need to be heard empathically. Everybody needs it. Everybody wants to be heard. And when we're heard, it's so much easier to hear others. So let's say you're upset and you go into someone and you explain how you feel and they respond by saying, I don't agree with you, that's not right, etc. And just blocking everything you're saying. So how difficult it's going to be for you to hear them because they've just blocked you. Whereas if they say, so what you're saying is this and you must be feeling this and that, and I'm really sorry to hear this. Or if it's personal, I'm sorry I've done that. I shouldn't have done that. You're right, I'm wrong. How easy is it going to be for you to listen to them if they have something to say about you that you're doing wrong after they've listened and acknowledged that they've done something wrong? It's much, much easier. I can't say it's a guarantee, but you can understand it's much easier to listen to others if you've been listened to. Now, in school, we learn to read, we learn to write. You have classes in communication, which will teach you how to speak publicly or how to negotiate or communicate your ideas. I've never taken a class, and I'm not aware of, and maybe someone can correct me, that there's a class in learning how to listen, learning how to read, write, speak, communicate. But I've never heard in public schools it's mandatory, or even if it exists at all, to take a class in learning how to listen. Do you realize the number one negotiating skill is listening? Because how can you negotiate unless you know in detail what the other person wants, what they need, what their feelings are, what they want to get out of this negotiation? And then you can address it. One of the greatest, I don't know, call it a sales technique, but one of the greatest attributes of a good salesman is his ability to listen. And we think, well, you want to be a good salesman, you want to talk a lot. That may be. But if you don't listen, you don't know what to talk about, because you don't know what they need. And I think I gave this example in Asian countries, especially in India, and maybe many third world countries. You'll go into a store and you'll be looking at one thing, and they'll go up to you and they'll start showing you all these things in the store, and you're obviously focused on a certain product, and they're showing you all these other products. Have you ever been in that situation? They don't ask you what you want. They just start showing you. We have this, and you're looking at maybe earrings for your wife, and so, well, we have necklaces, we have scarves, we have, because they're thinking presents. You want a present for your wife. But you're focused on earrings because she likes earrings, and they're showing you scarves and shoes and purses. This is extremely common. So it's obviously coming from a a sales culture where the idea of selling is you just talk, and these people are talking to you and they're showing you we have this and it's really good and it's a beautiful color, and you're totally uninterested. It's not why you came into the store. As opposed to saying, is there anything I can help you with? What is it that you need? Why did you come here, etc. Have you seen that before? Have you ever been in a store in a country like that? Don't say you like it, yeah, okay. If it's an Indian store, don't say you like it, say you don't like it, but if the price is good, I might consider it. Buyer's technique. It's the wrong color and it's too big. And it's way too expensive. Yeah. So, the best salespeople understand exactly what the person is looking for, what their needs are, and then they find the product or service that can satisfy that need. You know, I really need this done, but I don't have the time to drop it off, or I don't have the time to pick it up, or I need to get this product, you know, like with Amazon, you know, you don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to drive a half hour and go walk around a mall for a half hour. You can just go click, click, click. And the next day you have it in a box. So it fulfills a need. And so businesses that succeed are businesses that fulfill needs. And it's sometimes you can assume the need, but that's dangerous because you may assume wrong. Especially if you're from another country and you come into a new country and you assume things, you may be dead wrong. So the salesmen, they don't make assumptions. They find out, well, what are the needs? So if you're a leader and you understand the needs of people under you, then you can service those needs, and that is your job. Now you might say, but what if people don't know their needs or have the wrong needs? That's another discussion, but I don't think if people don't know their needs, then you have to help them understand their needs. But specifically as leaders within our organization, we're asking people, what inspires you? You have any inspiration in a particular service that's already existing in the temple? You have ideas how to do it better? Are you inspired to create a new service? That's not every leader can facilitate, but that's where it starts, at least understanding the needs. This man who mediates between countries, he said we have this saying, peace talks. But as I was explaining before, he was saying that he solved the conflicts by listening to the needs of the different parties and then proposing solutions that would satisfy both parties. And when both parties were satisfied, they would agree, and they were both very happy. So he said, we call it peace talks, but I think we should call it peace listens. Like that's what's going to create peace, is the listening. And the lots of frustration comes when we're not listened to. So one of the problems is that our general conditioning is when people talk, we're listening so we can respond, right? Okay, what are you saying? And then I'm thinking, what can I say? So there's another way of listening. In some cases, instead of listening to respond, you just have to listen to understand what the person's saying and feeling, and that's all you have to do, and you don't have to respond. And so we had spoken about this in the last few classes, but I just wanted to put it in the context of ordinary dealings, because we were putting it in the context of counseling and helping one-on-one. But we're talking here in this class more about practical dealings in groups. And so let's say you're in a group and you're in a meeting and everyone's sharing, and so you're thinking, okay, I need to respond to this. There's another way of listening. peace listens, creating, instead of peace talks, peace listens. You're just listening without the motive of responding. You're listening simply to understand what this person is saying. That requires, in my personal experience, getting out of your own head and your own mind and placing your own needs and desires on hold and getting out of the mood that everything that's said, my job is to respond to it. Because if we're thinking how to respond, it's hard to listen to what someone's saying, and it's even harder to feel what they're feeling because we're thinking about how to respond to it. So in the right context, in the right situation, sometimes the best thing is not to think about how to respond, but just think about how to understand. I'll give you a practical example. I'm going to Mayapur for a meeting, and the meeting is a newly formed group, and there'll maybe be 27. Well, there's supposed to be 35 of us, but I think we're down to 20. I think 27 are going to be in India. So 27 is a big meeting. And we're going to be discussing various issues. And like you, I also have my opinion about issues. And opinions are often developed by studying the issue, by listening to other people, and then coming to some conclusions, whatever the issue is. Male gurus, female gurus, Ritvik, non-Rit, the controversial things, Varnashram, traditional values versus adjusting to the modern culture, time, place, circumstance. So you read about it, you study it, you discuss it, you come up with ideas. And so one devotee was saying, well, it's good you're coming with your experience. You can share much. Especially you've been traveling a lot, so you can share about what's going on in ISKCON. And I was thinking that I don't want to speak a lot. I want to listen. There's so many exalted devotees, and the nature of this meeting is that they're going to be devotees from all generations and all genders and from various countries. So that was intentionally done, that we would have this broad body of representation. And so I'm an American, I think like an American. I've spent a lot of time in India, I understand something about Indian mentality, but we're going to have people from different age groups. And I don't entirely understand the mentality of, let's say, 30-year-olds. Because I have a son who's 46, and I have a daughter who's 17, 18. So I can understand a little bit of that mentality, but in between, I don't understand. Every generation's got their own mentality. So if we're in a world where we're talking to people we don't understand, we're not necessarily going to be relating well to them. Like we have realizations, but they don't think that way. So I'm going to this meeting and I'm thinking, I'm not going to talk a lot. I really want to listen because I don't think I can contribute well until I know what everybody's thinking and everybody's feeling. And there's all going to be various angles of vision because it's coming from male, female. We have 22-year-olds there. We have 72-year-olds there. We have Indians. We have Americans, Brazil, Russia. We're trying to get a cross-section of devotees from different parts of the world and different age groups, and male, female. So that's my desire. And in order to do that, I have to be in a mood that I want to learn what's going on, what are they thinking? Because obviously I know what I'm thinking. So someone may say, well, Mahatma Prabhu, why don't you speak up? And my response would be, I already know what I'm thinking. Of course, they want to know what I'm thinking. I already know what I'm thinking. I don't need to speak what I'm thinking. Or I need to hear what you're thinking to edify what I'm thinking, because it may change what I'm thinking, and I don't want to express what I'm thinking until I hear what you're thinking, because knowing your vision and your needs and your perception on a particular situation will in some way affect my thinking, or at least it will clarify if I'm right, or it will add information so I can rethink it. And so I think that's very important, as opposed to coming there with the idea that I already know the solution. Like, for example, I have a solution to a problem, but I'm not sure it's the right solution or the best solution. And so I discussed it with a godbrother, and he had a solution to a similar problem. And it expanded my vision of it. And I had specifically spoken to him to share my idea, but not to convince him of my idea. And I think that's important. Like, a lot of times we'll come to a meeting to convince people of our ideas, which is okay, but it's really important to hear their ideas so that you can understand if your idea is well informed and practical and takes into consideration the needs and feelings of others. So I just wanted to share that, not to toot my horn, but just to say that that's a strong feeling I have. And I think another thing we should be careful of, and I've seen this mistake being made, that sometimes we're a bit in isolation and we're considering something and we're coming up with an idea, and we've spoken to a few people and we get very, very clear on it and very enthusiastic about it and very fanatical. That was the word. This is how it is. I figured it out. It's like this. And then we go around talking about it, and at some point someone says something to blow our paradigm a little bit, and they say something that we hadn't thought about, which reveals maybe an area of ignorance in our part. And so our fanaticism is being revealed, or our, I don't want to say fanaticism, but our conviction is being revealed to be uninformed. And so before you're like, this is how it is, and this is the way it is, and this is the solution, this is the problem, before you become focused on this is the absolute and there's no other way around it, just be careful. Try to understand the position of other people, even if you don't agree with them. And so I think that was the title of the class, of how to understand people we don't agree with. Because if we're going to work in a group, and if we're going to be effective, we can't be effective just saying, this is how it is, and this is what I'm going to do, and if you don't agree, I don't talk to you. It doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. You may come in thinking, okay, this is what I think, but I want to be open to hear from you, because maybe there's something I don't understand, and I need to understand why you're thinking the way you're thinking, especially if you're in disagreement with me. Why are you thinking this way? I need to understand it, because I don't understand it this way. And at least if I take the time to understand you, to listen to you, not listen to respond to you, but just listen to you, that will help me in evaluating if my conclusion is correct, if I've taken into consideration what other people are thinking and other people are feeling. But if I go and just thinking this is right, this is the only way, it doesn't work in an organization. So if we're all understanding one another's vision, one another's needs and feelings, without first needing to respond, but needing to hear, then we can work well together. But if we're just coming to meet to share ideas, well, this is my idea, and I want to defeat your idea, that doesn't work. This is my idea. What do you think? Does this sound good to others? And someone might say, we tried your idea. It didn't work. And you might say, well, it didn't work because the situation was different. That was 10 years ago. The society's different now. We're a different group. I think it would work now. And then other people think, okay, let me think about that. That's a good point. We're not listening to prove one another wrong. We're not listening to analyze, we're first listening, on the first level of listening, we're listening to understand. Okay, what are you saying? I need to understand that. You can't have a collective, well-functioning group that doesn't listen to one another. We have to be able to listen to one another and also be very sensitive to what one another are feeling, and also to understand when you say, I want to do a program like this, there's probably needs that you have behind that program. Just like Krishna Karshini, she wants to do preaching in a particular way. But if you understand why she has a need, she doesn't want to present Krishna consciousness as some fanatical religion. And so she organizes, she says, I want to organize a program like this. It will go this way. We'll have it in an auditorium. People will pay. We'll have this, that, and the next thing. So, but you understand, behind that is a need to present Krishna consciousness in a professional way, in a non-religious way, with certain speakers, not every speaker, in a way that relates to people. She has all these needs because she's seen that we failed to do this and we're not as successful as we could be. And so when she's saying, I'd like to do this program, if you can understand her need, you understand more deeply why she wants to do it. Otherwise you might say, well, Prabhupada never did it like that. I don't think we should do it that way. I think you should just do it like this. But then when you understand her need, you go, oh, now I understand why you want to do it like that. Okay, that makes sense. Because we haven't been successful, and maybe this kind of program we were successful in the 70s, but since the 80s, this kind of program, or the 90s, it hasn't worked. And so you feel the reason is because people are different, and they need a different approach. They don't think the way they used to. And you go, oh, I see. So now you understand. So before you respond, the first thing you do is you listen to understand. Does that make sense? The reason I'm emphasizing this is because I will guarantee you it can be challenging to listen that way. Because we tend to be very self-centered. The whole universe is about us. It's about what we're thinking. It's about our intelligence. I have these great ideas that I want you all to hear. It's about our feelings. It's about what inspires us. It's about our needs. And I'm not saying that's wrong or bad, but I'm saying you can't be in that space if you're going to be able to hear people with the ability to understand them. If you're going to be able to hear just to focus on understanding, you can't be caught up with your own needs at that point. So, I'm just going through some points I have written down, and then I'll take your questions. I'll just read what I was just talking about. Maybe it makes it more clear, or it'll just remind us. You have to create a space in yourself to let the other person's opinion in your mind. In other words, if you come into a conflict or a meeting with the idea of defeating someone, then there's no space for real communication, because you're not allowing yourself to open up to try to understand them. Now, you know when you have allergy, what it feels like? It feels like you have 3,000 ants in your nose walking around. Bless you, you never have allergy, because it's like, well, unless you want to practice tolerance. So, one principle that's important to understand is that if you're speaking to me and I've opened up this space where now I'm in understanding mode, I'm not in responding mode. My mode now is, what do we say here? You have to create a space in yourself to let other person's opinion in your mind. To listen like this, you have to step back from your opinions. This helps you see the other person as not a bad person. You realize that this is a nice person, but who has a different opinion. So, if you sometimes, someone holds a view that makes you not like the person, and it makes you feel like this person is bad, isn't it? Or this is not a likable person. So you have to step back from that. You have to step back from your opinions and judgments about this person. And so the thing that's very important, I think some devotees or people in general misunderstand this. If, let's say, Krishna Karshini, you're speaking to me and I'm listening to you and I'm trying to understand what you say. The fear that someone might have, or let's say somebody is listening to you. I say, listen to Krishna Karshini. She has a point of view. I want you to hear it. And you know that Krishna Karshini has different points of view than you do. So there's a fear in listening. Right? What's the fear? The fear is, well, if I listen, then I try to understand, then I have to agree. No, you don't have to agree. Or it's going to make you agree, and maybe you don't want to agree. Listening to understand and agreement are two different things. So listening to understand is a communication skill. Agreeing, that is totally different. So in fact, how could I disagree with what you say unless I understand what you're saying? Have you ever been disagreed with and someone's disagreeing with something that you didn't say? Or they're disagreeing with the same thing you disagree with because they think you said something that you didn't, or you didn't even say anything. They assume that you believe something that you don't believe. Why do they assume that? Because you're from this part of the world, or because you're friends with so-and-so, and that's what that person believes. So it means that you must believe it. Have you ever been in that situation? That people already know what you believe? Well, you've never lived in India, so I know how you think. Someone told that to me. He said, well, you think like this because you don't live in India. At that point, I had been living in India for 6 years, which was kind of funny when I told them I do live in India. So, you don't want to make assumptions on what people believe unless you listen to them without trying to analyze. So don't be afraid that you have to accept what they say. But understand that you won't understand what they're saying unless you listen. You won't know how to disagree unless you make sure you understand what they say. And a lot of times, people make assumptions about us, or we make assumptions about what people believe that are not true. And I've done that a lot. And what I've realized is that as devotees, sometimes I make assumptions about people that kind of presumes that they're thinking like they don't have much intelligence, or they're thinking a bit like non-devotees. And I'm always, or I would say 99% of the time, I'm proved to be wrong. Why would I think that this devotee couldn't understand this? I think I'm so smart, I understand it, and he doesn't. He understands it, he may not agree with it, and he may have philosophical reasons that are based in Prabhupada's teaching. So don't assume that people are just stupid or blind or don't understand things. At the same time, people have their nature. And so sometimes when someone states something, you can see that what they're stating is connected to their nature, and they couldn't possibly understand it any other way because that's their nature. And so you hear them and you go, okay, he's saying this. And I just had this experience. There's a discussion now in the GBC about a certain topic, and the topic was analyzed philosophically, and also they asked many of the leaders, in addition to the GBC, to give their feedback. So I was reading all the feedback, and the feedback crosses a broad range of responses. And this one devotee responded in a very, very, what do we say? Yeah, narrow. Narrow was the word. He expounded in a very narrow way. I think from his perspective, he was responding in a strict way because he believed that some of the opinions in this, some of the feedback that was given was against Prabhupada's teachings. So he expressed that Prabhupada had said this, and to say anything else he felt offended, and he was really troubled by it, and he was very, very, very strong about what he was saying. And so when I read that, I not only understood what he was saying, but I understood a lot about him. That when Prabhupada says something, for him, that's it. It's no black and white. There's no gray. There's no gray area. This is what Prabhupada said, and this is what we should do. And he takes it as it is, and that's his good quality. But the problem was in this discussion, he hadn't heard everything that Prabhupada had said about the topic. And so he was saying Prabhupada said this and we shouldn't budge from it. The fact is that Prabhupada said other things to the contrary, as Prabhupada sometimes does. He puts light in both sides of the issue. So it helped me to understand this person by listening to him and trying to really see where he's coming from. And so by understanding where he's coming from as this very, very strict, chaste disciple of Prabhupada, then if we're going to have a discussion, I can say, Maharaj or Prabhu, are you aware of these other statements that Prabhupada made? And I would like your opinion on them. Because from your response, it seems to me that you weren't aware of these statements. I'd like to know if you were aware of them. And he might say, no, I wasn't. And say, well, could you read them and give me your response? So now you know how to deal with it. Or he'll say, I was aware of that. And then I could say, well, based on these statements, I'm finding it difficult to understand why you are why you're not budging on this point. Could you explain it? So, in other words, the more I understand about him, the better I can communicate, and the more he understands that I understand his position, the easier it is for him to communicate. So, it doesn't change my opinion, but it helps me communicate, and it also will help me understand him because I'm open enough to ask him. I said, well, maybe I don't understand it. Maybe I'm thinking I understand it better than he does, but maybe he understands it better than I do. And so I'm open to that. Could you explain this to me? Because from my perspective, it seems that Prabhupada is giving us the option. It's like this. Yes, what you said is true. It's like this. But Prabhupada said it's like this until this happens. And this is happening now. So why are we holding on to this instruction when Prabhupada himself said, you can change it in this circumstance? I want to know, what's your opinion? But maybe he's got some insight, or maybe he realizes that he was wrong because he didn't know that Prabhupada had given leeway to do it a different way. So you could understand how important it is in clarifying your own position to understand the position of everyone else. And don't make the assumption he's just a fanatic or he's small-minded or this or that. It's usually not that bad as we think. Sometimes it's bad, I will admit. Some people are very narrow-minded and fanatical. And that's their nature, and they will see things a certain way. But at least we understand, okay, that's what they're like, and we understand that they're like that, and then that also helps us in dealing with them and working with them. And we might say, well, I think I won't work well with that person because they just understand things in one way, and they don't want to understand it in any other way, and that'll be hard for me to work with because I don't understand it in exactly the same way they do. So at least if I understand them and understand their position, that also helps me. Okay. Now, the other point I'm making here, well, not another point, I just want to emphasize the point, is that we always have to be open to the possibility that maybe I don't understand this other person's position well, or I don't understand everything on this topic unless I first try to understand what they're saying. So if we want to get into this mood of understanding, to be in that space, then we have to be a little humble, and we have to think, okay, I may think I know a lot, but I have to be open to the fact that I may not know everything, and I may be wrong about things. So that's very important. So we go in to hear from others in this mood, and it may end up that we remain convinced about whatever it is we're talking about, as we were when we came in. But at least we listened. And so we have a better understanding of this other position, this other point of view. With a better understanding, it allows us to better consider our situation and maybe, as I said, adjust it, or at least we understand them and we still don't agree with them, but we're very clear about what they believe, and that is respectful to them. Now, there's a nice thing. There's a beautiful thing. This one man said, and I think this is applicable in ISKCON, probably applicable in every organization. He said that sometimes we have a meeting and we want people to come. We're having a meeting, we need your opinion, we're going to talk about this, or we're going to develop a new project, and so forth. So this man made an observation, and I think we see this in ISKCON as well. He said the best people often do not come to the meeting. They don't like meetings, or they don't think the meeting is valuable, or maybe they feel they won't be heard, or whatever. So he said what he did in his company is he went individually to those people. He found, either he knew who they were, or he found out who are the people that are most qualified to help us in this project that didn't come to the meeting, because everyone was invited to the meeting. And he said he would go and meet them one-on-one and say, I want to listen to you. What are your views? What are your ideas? What do you want to do? And he said that had amazing effects. That's, I think, something we should note, or something we could recommend to leaders. Why not go out? There's so many individuals that are capable and experienced in our community, but they're not participating. Why not, as a leader, go out and meet them one-on-one? Invite them to your house one-on-one and just ask them. And just listen to them. Say, what's on your mind? What do you want to do? What's your inspiration? Whatever. It might be just they have problems and they just need you to listen, or they might have inspirations to do things a certain way. And so this man was saying you'll get so much help that way, and you'll get so many great projects going and great ideas into the mix from all these people who are extremely qualified. And he said even perhaps more qualified than the people who show up for the meetings. And it would be a great loss to lose them. So I think that's important. Now, another thing this person said, which I think is important. Well, let me say. So he said, become a servant of the passion of the people you serve. Find out what they want to do. If you give them an idea they don't want to do, it won't work. And this is what I want you to do. Well, if you don't want to do it, it doesn't work. And I ask you, what do you want to do? And then you tell me, and that inspires them. And then you facilitate that. He was saying, he was summarizing this, and he was saying, if you want to be a successful leader, you have to learn how to just shut up. Like, don't talk so much and listen. So you have to find the people that want to do something and get them to talk to you. And then help them realize their vision. Isn't that a great way to lead? So, the last thing he said, and then we'll take questions or comments. The last thing he said was, in order to be able to listen to others' needs, you have to be in touch with your own needs. Sometimes, we say that in order to be selfless, you have to take care of yourself. In order to feed people on a fast day, it's important you eat first, and then you can feed others. So in order to be able to listen to others' needs, if your needs are not being met, or you're not in touch with your own needs, it's going to be hard to listen to others' needs, because you'll be thinking, well, what about my own needs? I'm listening to your needs, and my own needs are, I'm not even aware of my own needs. And so, this syndrome of you're always giving. Some devotees have given so much that they've given themselves away, and they gave so much to others, and they didn't give enough to themselves, and they burned out. So he was saying you have to be aware of your own needs and empathetic to yourself in order to take care of the needs of others and be empathetic to them. So now I finished. That was a little over an hour, and I want to go back to your questions or comments. Welcome to all of you. Krishna Karshani says, we have experience about trying to implant preaching technique from Russia and Poland. Of course it did not work. Yeah, that's I had this experience. Years ago, Italy was one of the most successful places in the world for preaching. They had a strategy. It was a beautiful strategy, very intelligent. And we tried to implement it in America. It didn't work. It was more implementable in Mexico because the cultures are more similar. Think about Italian cultures. People are more open and they're more interested in India. And in America, people are less interested in India. And they're more closed. It's harder. Just people in like Mexican culture, Latin, Italian culture, they're more open. They're more accepting. You can make friends very quickly. So they'll invite you in and listen to you. American culture, people are like, what do you want? Why are you here? A little more like that. Not all, but so it didn't work. So this is a good point. And in understanding the success that devotees are having in one country, then you always want to understand, okay, well, what are the principles and can we adapt those and adjust them? And like, for example, I just wrote a book. It's an introductory book, and I gave it to some devotees to review. And one devotee, who has written a lot of books himself, he said, you mentioned the word God too much. You have to be careful. And so Krishna Karshani is in Poland, and she says, it's no problem mentioning the word God in Poland. Maybe it's a problem if you don't mention the word God. Then they won't like you. But in America, God has a bad, he's not branded. God, the word God is not well branded. The creator, the source, the supreme, those are, other words for God. So, if you want to transport something that's working in Russia into Poland, the only reason you would do that is because you wouldn't understand the needs of the Polish people and where they're at. Or you want to take a process of spreading Krishna consciousness that worked in 1975 and apply it in 2018. You could apply aspects of it, but if you want to apply everything, then you have to make sure that the people now are still thinking exactly the way they thought then. And if not, you have to think, how can we adjust it to be more effective? Now, some devotees will say, the process is perfect, so whether it works or not doesn't matter, because this is the process. It doesn't seem to be that was Prabhupada's strategy. It seems that Prabhupada's strategy was adapt the process as adaptable as it can be without watering it down or losing our principles, to where the people are at, how they think, so that they can, like here is a broccoli. I cut it up and I cook it. If I cook it in Italy, it's good to add tomatoes and cheese to it. If I cook it in India, lots of oil, lots of turmeric, lots of chili. That's how they'll like it. They may like the Italian way, but they'll like the turmeric and chili oil way. If I'm cooking for college students, maybe more simple. They like, or some yoga center where they're healthy, so maybe more simple, not cooked so much, not spiced so heavily. So it's the same broccoli, but it's adjusted according to how people think. So you have to know how they think and what they like and what they don't like. And you might say, well, we don't give them what they like, we give them what's Krishna conscious. That also is true, but if we can give them Krishna consciousness and it's too spicy for them to eat, then what's the point? Or if it's not spicy enough for them to eat, then what's the point? So it requires we understand people. That's very important. Krishna Karshani says, I have a practical question. What to do in a situation when we have something important to say but this person doesn't want to listen to us? Oh, that's easy. You just go on Facebook and tell the world how bad they are because they didn't listen to you. Isn't that the solution? Isn't that what Prabhupada taught us to do? Social media is so dangerous. It's like we've given a tank to 10-year-old boys. We've given this big tank where we could actually destroy somebody online, isn't it? You could make up a story and destroy somebody, and that actually happened. I was just told a story. It happened to an actress. Her career was destroyed because someone made up a story, and it got out to millions of people, and she couldn't get any jobs as an actress. Sometimes the answer to your question is, what can you do? Absolutely nothing. And then, what do you do after you do nothing? Then you figure out, what am I going to do now that I can do nothing about this? That's, can I do anything about it? If you determine, no, nobody's going to listen to little old me. I'm a young devotee, or I'm not a leader, or I'm not a college graduate, or I'm a woman, or whatever reason they won't listen to you. If you conclude there's no way there's going to listen to me, then the next question is, what do I do now? And there are various things you can do. One is don't do anything. One is talk to someone and say, there's a problem, we need to solve it. What do you think we can do about it? Because we can't. The leaders are not open to it. What do you think we can do? And then, in some cases, there's nothing you can do, and you can only hope that someday the leader will be more open to listen, or you could only hope that when the new leadership comes, they'll be more open to listen. That's one. That sometimes prayer is all you can do. And generally the solution is to work around that situation. How can I work around that situation? So a workaround might be, let's say your leader doesn't hear you, and there's certain projects you'd like to do with the temple that you can't do because the leader doesn't think they're important, and you end up not doing them, or you end up doing them on your own in your own preaching programs outside. So those are the kinds of solutions. You can talk to other leaders and say, we have this problem here. I can't speak to my leader about it, but the problem's getting worse. Can we do something? And I don't think it hurts to bring it up with other people. Krishna Karshani, to me, when I see this problem, I don't see the problem is that there's a problem in the temple, you have a solution, and the leader won't listen, and because he won't listen, the problem's getting worse. I don't see that as the problem. I see the problem is more fundamental than that. That if we have a leader that's not listening, that means we're allowing people to become leaders who have never been trained to listen, who don't understand the importance of listening or the essential need of listening. I think that's the problem. That when you look at the problem that way, then it's not about this person anymore. It's about the training for the job. It's about management that's allowing people to take positions of leadership that aren't trained to hear or aren't capable of hearing. That's really the problem. And so sometimes when you're looking at a problem like this, you want to look at it on a more fundamental level. Say, what really is the problem? Because what I think is the problem may only be a symptom. Like there is a man, intellectual, maybe a professor or an intellectual writer. He said, Trump isn't the problem. He said, Trump is the symptom of the problem. Where society is going, the way our government is going, that the rigging of elections and so forth, that a person of this caliber who shouldn't be a president by nature of who he is became president. So the man said, the problem is not Trump. He's the symptom of the problem. So, maybe you have a leader and the leader is not able to listen. That's his nature, or he doesn't want to listen, whatever the case may be. That's not really the problem. It's a symptom of the problem that someone was allowed to become a leader of a temple without being given the skills to lead. And so, if he were given those skills, perhaps he would be listening, or be a better listener. Right? So that's a better way to see it. And then you could try to resolve the problem on that level. So then, rather than complaining about a situation in the temple, you might talk to people above him and say, I think we have a problem here in that the leader wasn't trained to listen, and a lot of devotees have some good ideas, and we see some problems that could be solved, but he's not willing to listen, or when he listens, he doesn't really listen. He has his way of doing things, and we're not making progress here, and things are worse now than they were 10 years ago, and they should be better. So that's one way of approaching it. So Krishna Karshani continues, I think the problem is that we're listening, but we're not really hearing what the other person is saying. Yeah. I am learning to listen. I am not good about listening, unfortunately. The people who have the hardest time to listen may be the people who have the hardest time not talking, or the people who like to talk a lot, or the people who have the greatest need to be heard, or the greatest need to understand, to be understood. Those people will have the hardest time listening. Because you want to be understood, you want your opinion to be heard. That's important for you. And so just to listen to someone else's opinion, especially if you disagree with it, that's not easy. But the point of this class is not to say, well, here's an easy technique to do it. I would say the point of this class is to show the importance of doing it and also underscore the fact that it's not easy. I never said it's easy. And I've never said that I've mastered it. I can admit, I will be vulnerable to you, that sometimes I can listen well, and sometimes I fail to listen because I'm very adamant about something, and it's so difficult to listen to another person's view on it when I'm 108% convinced they have no idea what they're talking about. That it's hard to listen. But the point is, you're listening to more than their opinion. You're listening to what's behind their opinion, what's the need behind. Like there's Ritvik philosophy. So if you listen to the philosophy of Ritvik, you can't really find support in it, in Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. You can extract certain things that Prabhupada said, but to me this is my perspective, it's like 2 + 2 = 5. Yeah, Prabhupada said this, he said that. And you've come up with a equation to say something that Prabhupada didn't say, or wouldn't conclude. So that's how I see it personally. But beyond that, I see a need. There's a need for unity in ISKCON. There's a need for purity in ISKCON. And they feel that unity and purity cannot be achieved if people take the position of Diksha Gurus. They could only be achieved if people take the position of Ritvik Gurus and initiate on behalf of Prabhupada. And it's the only way we can solve our problems. So they're concerned about the problem. So when you understand their needs, they want to see Prabhupada in the center. They don't want to see devotees let down by the fall downs of gurus. Then you're looking at it in a different way, and then you're hearing it in a different way. So it's not about, well, I don't agree with your philosophy because it's not supported in Shastra. And now you're hearing what's going on in their heart and what their needs are, and how much they want to see Prabhupada in the center of ISKCON, and how they're afraid that ISKCON will become weaker and weaker unless we get Prabhupada in the center, and Ritvik is the way to do it. So you disagree. No, Ritvik's not the way to get Prabhupada in the center. But we do agree that Prabhupada needs to be in the center. We do agree there have been very big mistakes made, and people have become influenced by their positions in negative ways, and so forth. You understand? So when we have this strong need to be understood, and we have this strong need to express our opinion, it's really hard to listen. So that's something to think about and something to work on. And so now, from hearing this class, one of the things I wanted you to remember is this mantra: hear to understand, not to respond. Hear to understand, not to respond. And you could make a note of that. Now you might say, isn't that circumstantial? Yeah, yes, it is circumstantial. Because sometimes people want you to respond. They need your response. They're asking for it. But again, my point is, initially, don't hear to respond, hear to understand, because until you understand, you won't be able to respond properly. So hear to respond, not to understand. And in some cases, there will be no response. You just need to understand. He said, Prabhu, can you believe in this? Can you explain it to me? So he explains it and said, thank you. Now I understand. I understand what you're saying. I'm clear on it. I needed to understand, right? Whatever, or like we have this controversy. The GBC at one point acknowledged, and the Shastric Advisory Committee acknowledged that, shastrically speaking, women can be gurus, but the GBC put it on hold. And so there was a debate. And so let's say you believe women shouldn't be gurus. But you really need to understand the other side of the argument. So you may listen to the other side of the argument. Oh, this is why you believe women should be gurus, A, B, C, D. So you're not listening to defeat them or respond or see how stupid they are or whatever. You're just listening to understand their reasoning and their logic and their evidence, shastric evidence, and things Prabhupada said. So now you have an understanding. You're better equipped to respond, and you're better equipped to formulate your ideas, or maybe your ideas will change and you'll actually accept their ideas. So that's the point I'm making. It's not that you won't speak. But in some cases, there's nothing to speak. You don't need to speak. It doesn't matter what you think. I'm just trying to understand your view on the female Diksha Guru issue. It doesn't matter what I think. I need to know, in this particular situation, what is the idea behind this? I'm trying to formulate my own idea, and I just need to know what the idea is behind it. And so, once you give me the idea behind the reason women shouldn't be gurus, if I believe they should be, now I can consider my position. I don't have to defeat you. I don't have to say I don't agree with you. That wasn't the point. So my point here is that in many situations, the point is not that you have to say anything or prove anybody wrong. You don't have to be understood. The point is you just have to listen to understand. That's all. And so that can curb the tendency to speak, because the tendency to speak is what is destroying our ability to hear. It's as blunt as I can say it. The tendency to speak, our tendency, our need to be heard, it can get in the way of our hearing. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't speak and you shouldn't be heard, but when you need to listen, you have to subdue or sublimate in somehow you have to minimize that need to throw your opinion out, let the world know what you think, and just listen. So you can understand, okay, what are the people who don't want women to be gurus? Why are they thinking this way? I don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. But it makes sense to them, and if it makes sense to them, I need to understand why. What is it? That's the point. I'm sure that makes sense to you. And so that will help you curb the tendency to not be able to listen. Katie wants to become a member of Sabha. Well, maybe at some point you can become a member. We need Romanians. There aren't any. Krishna Karshani says, well, actually it would be interesting on Sabha to have brand new devotees. Maybe even congregational members who aren't devotees, who are experts in certain fields. So Krishna Karshani says, I have doubts. If everyone is able to listen and understanding, empathy is needed. There are people who, by nature, black and white, and communication with them seems to be impossible. Yeah, so the solution, as I said, for them is you listen to them. And maybe by listening to them, they'll listen to you. Human nature, you know. Someone says, okay, Mahatma Prabhu, I want you to do A, B, and C. I completely disagree with A, B, and C. I think it's not only, I shouldn't do it, but I think Prabhupada wouldn't want it. And I think it's very narrow and immature and, frankly, fanatical. Right? So you tell me those things. There's no emotional response, I say. So what you feel is this, this, and this. And now they're very happy that I've understood. I say, thank you for that. So if there's any way they're ever going to listen to you, if the person is like you say, by nature, black and white, this might be the only way. Aside from them making some mistake and then realizing that the people warned them that we're going to make that mistake. You know, that's another thing. Yet, like I'm saying, if people aren't going to listen, then you have to make a plan that works around that. Okay, I know this person isn't going to listen, so what do I do? What's my plan? How do I work? What's the workaround? So, Wilfred has this to say. I have to go a second. I was talking about Srila Prabhupada to a young devotee, a millennial, and I was very surprised to hear that she thought Srila Prabhupada's preaching was harsh. I understand that, but I also think it's important that devotees listen to his classes. How do I get through to her without turning her off? How do I convince her that Srila Prabhupada is the principal guru in our movement, that listening to his lectures are a blessing? Probably she's been listening to lectures by those who are pretty mellow. And so maybe in contrast, she thought Prabhupada's lectures were harsh. Prabhupada was cutting through a jungle, this is what I would tell you. He was cutting through a jungle of misconception and cutting through a jungle of disciples very, very much still wavering in Maya and not always 100% convinced of Krishna consciousness. So sometimes they needed a big explosion in their consciousness to become purified. Not always, but sometimes. And sometimes they needed a big explosion to clarify their misunderstandings and to just shake them up. And so that's what Prabhupada was doing. And for her, it may be that Prabhupada was harsh or heavy, but sometimes, especially for Prabhupada disciples, they'll say something like, well, I just heard a lecture, and it was so heavy. Prabhupada lecture, it was so heavy. And it was just what I needed. And so often when Prabhupada was heavy, we appreciated it. And Guru means heavy. That we actually needed someone to come and slash our attachments. And the attachments were the rope of the attachment was so thick and hard, we needed someone with a very powerful sword to come and slash it. And so that's what Prabhupada did. So Prabhupada wasn't always harsh, but sometimes he was, because there was a point to be made, and it was, in his estimation, the best way to make it, or the only way to make it. And I would just tell her, I said, listen more, and someday you may come to realize that some of those harsh statements were actually the most purifying things for you that Prabhupada ever said to you. Something like that. And traditionally, the tradition or the culture of guru in India is the guru is not some laughing Buddha type, but the guru is someone who comes and exposes your weaknesses and faults in no unkind language. In no kind language. He comes and he just tells it as it is. That's the traditional role of the guru. And so I would tell her that, and I would say in India you'll find almost like if a guru gives a lecture and he's not harsh like that, it almost lets the people down. Like they expect that. Like we're very attached, and we want to go hear the sadhu, and we want to get blasted basically, because our attachments are just grabbing us in the heart and we can't let them go. And we need to hear from the sadhu. And we want him to just cut it. And that's what people expect from a sadhu. So a lot of times Prabhupada is doing that, especially some of the harshest lectures are in India, because that's what people want, that's what they need, that's what they expect. They go to the lecture to be chastised. Believe it or not. It doesn't make sense to a Westerner. But they're actually going to the lecture to be chastised. Isn't that interesting? They're going there, to be exposed, to be smashed, for their attachments to be cut. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said that the guru's job is to do an operation and remove the poison. And so his words are like a knife, and sometimes they hurt. But he wasn't always that way, but he was that way when it was needed. Krishna Karshini asks, how to disagree with someone without making the other person feel bad? By understanding, by listening, by empathizing, by acknowledging. I have someone who's I respect, who has an affinity for Ritvik. So he could explain it to me. He said, okay, I understand where you're coming from. I understand why this makes sense to you. But I just can't get around the fact that Prabhupada said this and Shastra says that. And I just think, in my mind, unless someone can make sense out of those things that Prabhupada said, I just can't accept the Ritvik. And, I'm not here to convince you. I'm just expressing my opinion. So, and like we were saying before, sometimes you don't have to disagree because there's no stakes involved. Like, let's say you're a Ritvik and I disagree with you, but you're not coming to the temple telling people don't accept a guru from ISKCON, or telling people that they should give up their guru and take initiation. So I don't have to let you know that I disagree. Maybe we're doing service together and there's no problem. So we don't even have to talk about it. There are people here in Alachua who are Ritviks and they do service here. They have responsibilities. So as long as they're not dissuading anyone from taking initiation or pushing people to take Ritvik initiation, there's no need to discuss it. So that's something to consider. Linda from Monterey, not California, Monterey, Mexico. She says, what would you do if suddenly, in front of you, an old male devotee yell at another female devotee, a local authority in public, being disrespectful to her, because she didn't allow something to happen due to local restriction? What should you do? Well, Linda, evaluate the situation, and if you can beat him up and knock him out without him knocking you out, then yeah, go for it. Okay. Literally, no, I didn't mean that, but it would make a good scene for a movie, right? We'll have different methods to deal with this problem. Number one, knock him out. That way he'll stop talking. What the Shastra says is that we should defend devotees. So I think the best thing would be say, Prabhu, please calm down. Then explain the situation. Said that it's not allowed here. She tried. She couldn't do it. Please don't treat her that way. Of course, I don't know how angry he is or who he is. But the other thing you could do is just stand next to her and hold her hand or hug her and just say, don't say anything. Just we can't. Just don't worry about him. Don't worry about him. He's wrong, and just, don't get upset. Just let him talk. Let him say his word and don't say anything. That's another option. Another option is just pull her away. And he's talking to her and you just pull her away, and now he's got no one to talk to. That might be the easiest solution, actually. Who are you going to yell at now? The girl's gone. So he's yelling at her, and you just grab her by the arm and say, let's go. And then you talk to her as you're leaving, and he's like, what's he going to do now? Run after you and scream? So that way you're not really making an offense to anyone. Sometimes when people are angry, you can't reason with them. So that's another consideration. Reasoning with an angry person may be not wise. But in some way you should defend her. Right? Yeah. Some way you defend her, some way protect her. If I'm in a situation like that and I see that going on and it's not appropriate to do anything, I would just go up to the devotee and afterwards, and I would say, what they said is unfair. Don't take it personally. I don't think what he did was right. I think he needs to be spoken to. Somehow pacify them, because when things like that happen, it can really be difficult for that devotee. So Wilfred says she does listen to a very mellow devotee. That's what I thought. Srila Prabhupada always sounded loving to me, even when he was harsh. Yeah. So that's the other point. I'm glad you brought that up. You say that even though Prabhupada was harsh, there was so much love in him, and the harshness was a manifestation of that love. He was concerned about people. So he was concerned about their Krishna consciousness, and he felt that's what they needed, and so that was tough love. So, yeah. And some devotees wouldn't preach that way. Some devotees wouldn't be so heavy. And so maybe she got thrown off. Krishna Karshani says, the good news for me is that right now in Mayapur, devotees doing courses of managing, teaching how to listen as one of the most important abilities. Listen, not listing. How to listen. T-E-N-I-N-G. How to listing. I'm listing all the offenses you're making while I'm listening to you. Yeah, it's very important. Listening, yeah, so important. Can't underestimate. What I did was trying to explain at him why she was doing it. He kept yelling. When he finished, I hugged her and explained to her that he was that way. Yeah, so you did the perfect thing. You did exactly the perfect thing. But you know what? The next time it happens, just grab her and walk away. And that would teach him that you can't do that. It's not acceptable. Anyway, try it next time and see. I think it's a good strategy. You know, like let's say a husband's yelling at a woman, and that woman's your friend. Just grab her and pull her away. Say, just get away right now. He's angry. You need to be away from him. Then maybe some other people, once you pull her away, then maybe some other people can address him. My friend devotee is participating in such courses right now, so there is a hope that leaders, L-E-A-D-E-R, leaders. Litters are people who, we can call litters people who buy marijuana. They buy a lid of marijuana. We'll call them litters. In the future, leaders will be more about listening. Yeah, that would be good. So now Linda's asking the question. I'm a young devotee. I don't want to disrespect him either. This is a sensitive issue, right? But if you feel that the devotee that he's dealing with, her Krishna consciousness will be jeopardized by her, will be jeopardized, and the best thing to do would be to remove her from the situation, then do it. And, I guess that, the question is, do you respect someone who's disrespecting someone? Do you respect someone while they're disrespecting somebody else? So, then the question is, do you respect a leader while they're doing something that is not worthy of respect? And that's not really the position. And our Shastra doesn't say respect someone while they're doing something disrespectful. Our Shastra doesn't say respect them while they're doing something wrong. It doesn't say that. So you're respecting her by removing her. And if he's disrespected by it, then you can set up a time to talk about it. And why did I do that? Because he's saying I felt that this was jeopardizing her Krishna consciousness, and she was going to lose enthusiasm, and she had done a lot of service, and she did her best. And I felt that you didn't understand the whole situation, and I thought it would be best for both of you, and that's why I did it. And then you can ask him, if this ever happens again, what should I do? What should I do in it? What am I supposed to do in a situation like that? And that question can be asked only if he realizes what he did was wrong. So, we're going to have class at 3 o'clock today, 3 o'clock my time. For those of you who want to come, that's a time that's good for Australia. And we're going to talk about, reoccurring patterns, psychological patterns, something like that. I have to read it. There should be, hopefully, an advertisement sent out. I don't know if Guru Nish just sent it out or not. Okay, we will see you later if you come. And tomorrow, we're going to meet at 8 in the morning, which is an hour later than this class started, because I have a meeting at 6, and I don't know how long the meeting's going to last, but it's possible it could go more than an hour. And just to be safe, I want to start at 8 o'clock. And I don't want, last time I had this meeting, I had to leave it. Or I came late because of class. So this is going to be the last class on listening. I think we've covered it. If you want to learn more, then you can Google Bir Krishna Maharaj communication or listening. He's done a seminar on it, and it's recorded. And then tomorrow's class at 8 o'clock, we're going to talk about something that I think is very, very important. I called it balancing your needs with your needs for renunciation. In other words, I'll give you a little appetizer for what it is. That I was thinking about something which I've noticed probably through my whole career in Krishna consciousness, but it was just catching my attention of how sometimes things which we give up, things which we renounce, become more attractive to us by renouncing them. And then, in a sense, by renouncing them, we become more attached to them. And I think what it shows is that we have a need for those things. And by renouncing them, the need becomes stronger. So the question then becomes what to renounce. What level of renunciation is actually healthy? And at the same time, I may have a need to renounce something, but I'm not ready to renounce it. So how do I balance my need on the physical, emotional level with my need on the spiritual level for more renunciation? I would like to renounce A, B, and C, but if I do, I'll probably become more attached to A, B, C, and D. I'm not yet able to give it up. And then, if I'm not able to give it up, how do I engage it, or how much of it can I do, and is it bad? And are there ways that it's okay to satisfy satisfy myself materially? Where's my threshold where it becomes a problem, and where's the threshold where it becomes a problem if I don't satisfy? So I want to talk about that. I think it's going to be an interesting discussion, and I think it's super important. I think a lot of devotees misunderstand this and end up trying to be more renounced than is good for them. Renunciation is good if you can actually do it. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, 8 o'clock EST. That should be 1 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. 1 o'clock. It should be. And then it should be, what? I don't know. In India, that should be, I can't calculate, 6:30 in the evening maybe. Okay. We'll see you later today or tomorrow. Hare Krishna.